Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And as you guys can tell, the 20th anniversary of Evangelion passed this week. And well, I love Evangelion.
I like it a lot.
And it seems you guys do as well, as the demand for an Evangelion video has been there since the start of my channel. Godzilla is doing super hot right now, so I decided to kill two birds with one stone by combining the two franchises for a matchup video. Off the bat, I knew I had to talk about Kiryu, as most of the Godzilla fanbase has noticed the similarities between these two mechs. Both are cyborgs built on top of the remains of a giant creature that once brought great destruction in the past, but are repurposed in modern day to fight angels or Godzilla in Kiryu's case. The main pilot of the mech in question is very unsure of his or herself, and with the mech they learn to accept themselves and rise up to the challenge of the threat. Both mechs also have a spirit trapped within them, and said spirit has a tendency to take over the mech and go berserk. So yeah, overall pretty similar, almost too similar. Whether you think one is a ripoff or not, let's have some fun today. Today we're going to talk about how each mech would do in the other mech's shoes, and before we get into the analysis, let's set some guidelines. Kiryu's goal is to take out the main angels. Any weird non-combat ones like the computer one or anything from the third impact will not be relevant in today's matchup. Kiryu's a fighting machine, so let's not put him against the third impact. That's kind of a cop-out in my opinion. And plus, Kiryu's main goal is to prevent the third impact, so if it happens, he loses. For the three main Evangelion pilots, their one and only goal is to take out Godzilla. Shocking, I know. Each combatant will have access to the previous one's allies, so for example, Kiryu has all of Nerve as well as Misato backing him up, while our three Evangelion pilots have a whole family of Mothras as well as a JSDF backing them up. So with the rules set, let's get into the analysis. Alright, we'll start with Evangelion since that's what you guys want to see. Before I start outright scaling them, I want to tell you guys that, like all things in Evangelion, the scaling is pretty broad and left up for interpretation, kind of like the story. But we'll start the more simple, straightforward stuff and work our way up. So with that, the Evangelions are casually in the city to large mountain tier of power, as they upscale N2 mines, which are shown to be essentially useless against a typical angel. At best, they only burn off some of their skin and lead them to go into some type of dormant state, and at worst, they only delay the ongoing attack by a couple seconds. N2 mines are typically likened to and compared to nuclear bombs in a lot of supplementary material, but when examined in the show, they output anywhere from 3.6 megatons to even 1.92 gigatons of TNT, or city to even large mountain level at their peak. The Eva units are able to permanently take out these angels as well as survive their self-destruction. And while we're talking about the Evangelion's durability, I guess now is just a good time as ever to talk about synchronization and how it links to the Evangelion's performance. The Evangelion units are tied to their pilots, so to put it simply, the higher the sync rate, the better the Evangelion performs. And with a cast as mentally ill as Evangelion, it fluctuates more times than not. A pretty good blatant example of synchronization comes to us from the 9th episode of the show. Both Shinji and Asuka get laid out by an angel that was later put into a dormant state by a city level bomb. But after working on their sync rate, they no-diff the angel and no-cell the angel's self-destruction, which was calculated to be around 112 megatons of TNT or mountain level. And even the armor of the Evangelions is unscratched. So Evangelion's kind of weird like that, as instead of having straightforward attack potency ends, it kind of fluctuates like that. So with that important piece of context, we can talk about some of the higher ends. In End of Evangelion, Asuka's able to damage and rip apart the mass reduction Evangelions. Later in the film, the same mass reduction Evangelions contribute to the excavation of the Dark Moon. True, there's like 10 people contributing to this feat, but the individual output has been calculated to be anywhere from 32 to even 196 gigatons of TNT, which is island level to even large island level. Asuka was ripping these guys apart and only lost due to two factors, them having the Lance of Longinus and her running out of time. But now we can start to get into the continental ranges if we take into account that all three main Evangelions are clones / copies of the original angel Adam, who caused the second impact just by waking up, which was an event that produced an explosion upward of 18 billion megatons of TNT, or roughly 18 petatons of TNT, which is multi-continental. Now, while I'm not scaling the Evangelions to Adam at his peak, I don't think it's that much of a stretch that they should scale to him waking up, as well as the fact that the flesh that would go on to make the Evangelions is actually the same flesh found in Antarctica, meaning that these guys are literally derived from skin and flesh that survived multi-continental explosions. This is somewhat consistent, as is a feat in the show in which Rei throws the Lance of Longinus, with enough force to split the clouds over Tokyo, with the force of this throw being calculated to be in the exatons, and really close to moon level. Granted, I have heard arguments that the kinetic energy of the lance, as well as the force shown on screen, was due to the lance just being a typical god-killing weapon. So people are kind of arguing that it's a MCU Thanos and Infinity Gauntlet situation, where it's a weaker character with a stronger weapon. But I kind of disagree with this opinion, as Rei is typically a pretty headstrong pilot, so any quote-unquote anti-feats could simply just be equated to lower synchronization rates, as well as the fact that the whole scene shows herself fixing her feet, aiming, and putting all of her force into the throw. So to try to suggest that she doesn't scale to any of it would be a little disingenuous in my honest opinion. But I'll let you guys decide on Evangelion scaling. But to wrap up the attack potency section, they have casual city to large mountain scaling, fairly consistent island level to even baseline multi-continental stuff, and at their absolute peak, they can be scaled into the exatons, just shy of moon level. But how about speed? For some of the slower stuff, that lance throw was calculated to be around massively hypersonic, but this isn't the last time that Rei comes in clutch with her speed feats, as she was able to dodge a photon blast that was aimed at Shinji from close range. Oh, I'm sorry, I mean a particle blast, so light speed stuff. But anyways, this feat has been calculated to be around relativistic to even relativistic plus. This is fair enough in my opinion, as Adam is often described as and shown to be an angel of light. Combine this with the calcs, you can argue that speed of light scaling for the Evangelions is not so far-fetched. Overall, pretty good stuff. But how does this hold up to Kiryu and Godzilla? Before I start this part of the video, I want to say that I somewhat have already covered Kiryu Saga in the past, and I'd like to say that I somewhat unknowingly downplayed them. But by how much is the question? Let's find out. Obviously you have the calcs for the Absolute Zero canon that are in the exatons, with some of them even being in moon level. Both Godzilla and Kiryu should scale to this, as Kiryu was at the epicenter of the explosion, and Godzilla was the one that was getting hit point blank. Some of you guys may already think this is the peak of their scaling, and I'm about to say something blasphemous to some of you guys, but Kiryu is objectively stronger in Tokyo SOS and has better weapons in the Absolute Zero canon. His Absolute Zero canon is replaced with a triple major cannon, and he's stated to be just as powerful as before. And there's even one statement that says by replacing Kiryu's Absolute Zero cannon with the spiral hand thing, it was an actual improvement. This is shown in the film, as the spiral hand can actually penetrate Godzilla's skin, whereas the Absolute Zero cannon could not. And if you guys are still doubting this line of scaling, because granted it's a little weird, Godzilla is stated to be stronger in this film than he was in the last. There's also literally the fact that, I don't know, Kiryu is literally a super juiced up Terminator built up from the bones of the original Godzilla. This is important because the bones in question were able to survive and be intact from the entire yield of the Oxygen Destroyer, which if you remember my last couple videos, can get the small planetary at its peak. And if you don't buy that line of scaling off of the Oxygen Destroyer, it's stated that no weapon could ever hurt Kiryu Godzilla, so yeah, there's that as well. But if you want more solid, higher attack potency ends, we're gonna have to talk about the greater Kiryu Saga timeline. The Kiryu Saga, like most Godzilla continuities, is a branch off the original 54, but it also seems to be a branch of the Showa era as well, because the Kiryu Saga made the odd choice of canonizing a couple Showa era films in its continuity. And this is even crazier when looking into the guidebooks, because Anguirus, Gigan, and Kumonga, as well as the King of Terror himself, Ghidorah, all existed in the Kiryu Saga continuity. And if you think this is not enough to prove that this is a branch off the Showa era, each of these monsters appeared when their films came out, with Kumonga arriving in 67, Gigan and Anguirus appearing in 72, and Ghidorah himself arriving in 1999, which is an obvious reference to Destroy All Monsters. So if you want my opinion on the subject, it seems that the Kiryu Saga is a branch timeline of not only 54, but the Showa era as a whole, in which raids again didn't happen. Overall, this means that attributes of the Kiryu Saga can be likened to that of those of the Showa era. So what? If you remember what I said about the Kiryu Saga, there was actually a Ghidorah that existed in that timeline. And if this is a branch off the Showa era, every Ghidorah in the Showa era is born from a star exploding, kind of like the Celestials from the MCU. So this hypothetical mystery Ghidorah should have the same feat as well. Godzilla should upscale off of this, as he's stated to be the strongest monster in history, and even called a monster among monsters. Godzilla also killed his Mothra, and that Mothra was an evolved version of the Mothra that beat Ghidorah via self-destruction, granted, but the fact that they were able to fight on par with each other before then is quite the feat in itself. And then you have Kiryu Saga Godzilla blowing up a stronger Mothra. Mothra in Tokyo SOS should also upscale the original 64 Mothra, as that's a canon film in the Kiryu Saga as well. And 64 Mothra could dominate a 64 version of Showa Godzilla, and a larva of that Mothra could restrain and bite Showa Ghidorah. Showa Ghidorah has a lot of high ends, but I'm not going to be using that. That's kind of weird in my opinion, especially since we're gooning off freaking guidebook timeline statements, but I digress. All of this at the very least should upscale the Kiryu Saga to planetary, and using this high-end grander cosmology interpretation, Kiryu and Godzilla should upscale to that level of attack potency. But how about speed? Well, both of these guys should easily be in a relativistic category in terms of speed, as Kiryu could dodge Godzilla's atomic breath point blank, with this particular Godzilla's atomic breath being confirmed to be pure radiation, meaning that it moves at the speed of light, meaning that Kiryu's feat of dodging it point blank is at bare minimum a relativistic feat. But seeing as Kiryu's called more mobile via upgrades in Tokyo SOS, I wouldn't say that it's too crazy to upscale Kiryu and Godzilla to a speed of light to even faster than light speeds by that time period. Alright, and with all the stats laid out like that, how do I see this going down? Well, Kiryu has a distinctive attack potency advantage, especially in comparison to the average Angel. And I know what a lot of you guys are thinking, how is Kiryu going to get past the average AT field? And overall, as I've demonstrated, AT fields aren't nearly as durable as you guys think. While most nerve weapons are ineffective, lower tier Angels have been affected by N2 mines, and with enough force, AT fields can be outright penetrated, as shown by Ramel. So with Kiryu lowballed being in the exitons, and highballed him being small to large planet level, he has a large enough AP to where I'd say that all of the average Angels that he's fighting in this scenario would probably go down. And I'm afraid the mass production Evangelions don't fare any better, as he's much stronger than Asuka, who was able to rip them apart. Kiryu's time limit is pretty short, granted, but it's much longer than the 5 minutes that the Evangelions have to work with. And as for speed, he's probably a little bit faster than the Evangelions, as his speed of light stuff is a little bit better in my opinion. Alright, how about the Evangelions? How would they do against Godzilla? And I'm afraid to say that they don't perform nearly as good as Kiryu would. Despite the final battle being a 6v1, considering that the Evangelions have 3 other Mothras helping them out, Godzilla, like Kiryu, has a distinct attack potency advantage. And unironically, he should be faster than them, as he can go blow for blow with Kiryu. It's nothing crazy, he's not going to perception blitz them or anything like that, but if we're going to go like tier for tier, Godzilla does have the speed advantage. The Avas should be able to tag him and dodge his atomic breath, but base to base, they're not hurting Godzilla. So 9 times out of 10, I have Godzilla winning this matchup mid-diff. But wait, I said 9 times out of 10. What is the one way that the Evangelions can cheese a win? And well, to answer that, we're gonna have to talk about Awakened Evangelion Unit 1. Earlier I mentioned something about a spirit being trapped in the Evangelion unit, but what I failed to mention was that the spirit in question is actually Shinji's own mother. And during desperate situations, Shinji's mother will actually take control of the Evangelion. And well, the only thing I can compare it to is a mother bear. As in, she will literally maul you if you mess with her cub. I mean literally, she will munch down on you. She's done it before. But anyways, moving on to the lower ends, Evangelion Unit 1 in this state is definitely small planet level, as she was able to rip apart the gigantic Rey-Lilith fusion as seen at the end of Evangelion. I'm not going to show it for obvious reasons, but just know that Rey, just by opening her wings in that state, was calculated to produce at least small planet levels amount of energy just by opening its wings. But for higher ends, we're gonna have to talk about synchronization rate one more time. And typically during the show when Evangelion Unit 1 awakened, a lot of the nerve officials thought that the reading read 0. But in the final Evangelion movie, it's revealed that whenever the synchronization read 0 during the awakened state, it actually just meant infinity. This can be further supported as Unit 1 while awakened literally ripped through the 12th Angel, who had no physical shape, and Evangelion Unit 1 was only able to rip it from the inside. The interior of the Angel is actually quite big, with some of the characters stating that it was a space that led to another universe, meaning that it would be an infinite size space, as different universes are more than an infinite distance away from each other. And more blatantly and specifically, it was called the Direct Sea, which is an IRL theoretical concept, but to put it simply, it would just be an infinite size space. This is consistent with statements that say it's a pocket universe, an alternate second dimension, and it's said to be of considerable size. This is visually apparent as well, as when we see the interior of the angel, it's just a blank white void. Think of it like the Heaven Planet from Dragon Ball Z, where it's described and shown visually to be a planet, but the lore says that it's as wide as the universe. While Unit 1 awakens in this state, its power level reads 0, and it literally rips through the infinite size space. So overall, while Godzilla has the attack potency to one-shot all of them base to base, he better get rid of Shinji first, before Mama decides to intervene, because once she does, I don't see Godzilla winning that fight. I'm gonna be honest with you. Only way that he would be able to stack up to Awaken Unit 1 is if you really wank that unseen Ghidorah. If you believe he's a variant of Showa Ghidorah, he would upscale 40 beings, but are we really gonna do that? Is that really consistent? I gave Kiryu Saga Godzilla planetary off of cross-verse scaling, granted, but that was close enough to the Oxygen Destroyer where I could be like, fair enough. But to wank Kiryu Saga Godzilla to the high ends of the Showa era, I would personally have to draw a line at that, as there's not enough feats for me to really say that's consistent. I know some of you guys might be thinking the same thing about Awakened Unit 1, but at least these feats are shown on screen. At least the statements are seen on screen. And I wouldn't even say any of this is inconsistent, as it only scales the one character who we only see a handful of times. You know what I'm saying? There's levels to that. So with that, we're done with another video. I hope you guys like the Evangelion Godzilla stuff. I haven't scaled Evangelion on the channel. My first attempt. If I find more stuff, I can always do more stuff. So if you know more about Evangelion scaling than I do, hit me up. I got me on the app begging for metas. But anyways, we'll be back next week. And until next time, stay big, G fans.